The screen fades in from black, and we are immediately thrust into a world of opulence. The camera pans across a sprawling penthouse office bathed in the cold glow of LED lights. Towering glass windows stretch from floor to ceiling, offering a breathtaking view of a city skyline glittering under the night sky. Raindrops streak down the glass like tears, casting distorted reflections of the man seated behind a massive mahogany desk. This is Ethan Carter, a name synonymous with power, wealth, and control. Ethan leans back in his leather chair, his sharp jawline illuminated by the soft blue light of multiple computer monitors surrounding him. His piercing gray eyes scan through financial reports, stock market trends, and news headlines that all revolve around one central figure, himself. On one monitor, a live ticker scrolls endlessly, displaying the latest valuation of his tech empire, $42 billion and climbing. Another screen flashes breaking news about his upcoming product launch, hailed as the future of artificial intelligence. Yet, despite the outward appearance of success, there's something hollow in his gaze. It's not satisfaction, it's calculation. He takes a slow sip from a crystal tumbler filled with amber liquid, the ice clinking softly against the glass. For a moment he pauses, staring out at the rain-soaked city below. Destiny, he mutters aloud, his voice low and gravelly, almost mocking. That's for people who can't take charge of their own lives. He sets the glass down with a deliberate thud, the sound echoing faintly in the cavernous room. This isn't just arrogance talking, it's conviction. Ethan has spent decades building this empire brick by brick, clawing his way up from nothing. Born into poverty in a small Midwestern town, he grew up watching his parents struggle to make ends meet. His father worked double shifts at a factory, coming home exhausted every night, while his mother juggled odd jobs to keep food on the table. From an early age, Ethan learned that life was unforgiving, and if you wanted something, you had to fight for it. No handouts, no miracles, just sheer willpower. But along the way, something shifted. As Ethan climbed higher and higher, he left pieces of himself behind. Friendships faded because they demanded time he couldn't afford to give. Romantic relationships crumbled under the weight of his ambition. Even family ties became strained. His parents passed away before he could truly reconcile with them, leaving a void he refused to acknowledge. Now at 43, Ethan stands alone atop his mountain of success, surrounded by luxury, but haunted by emptiness. The scene cuts to a flashback. Young Ethan, no older than 12, sits hunched over a rickety kitchen table littered with unpaid bills. His mother places a plate of burnt toast in front of him, her hands trembling slightly. "We'll get through this, sweetheart," she says, forcing a smile. But young Ethan doesn't respond. Instead, he stares at the bills, his mind already racing with calculations. How much would it cost to fix the leaky roof? Could they afford groceries next week? These questions consumed him even then, shaping the man he would become. Back in the present, Ethan exhales sharply, shaking off the memory. He glances at his watch, a sleek platinum timepiece worth more than most people's annual salaries, and frowns. It's late, far past the hour when most executives would have gone home. But Ethan isn't like most executives. He thrives in these quiet, solitary moments when the rest of the world sleeps. Here, in his fortress of solitude, he feels untouchable, in control. Yet tonight, something feels different. Maybe it's the storm outside, its relentless rhythm pounding against the windows like a heartbeat. Or maybe it's the gnawing sense of unease that's been creeping up on him lately, a feeling he can't quite put into words. Whatever it is, it compels him to act. Rising from his chair, Ethan grabs his coat and heads for the elevator. As the doors slide shut behind him, the camera lingers for a moment on the empty office. The monitors continue to glow silently, their graphs and charts indifferent to the turmoil brewing within their owner. Then the screen fades to black. Before we move on, dear viewer, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like Ethan, like you're chasing something bigger, only to realize you've lost sight of what truly matters? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing to our channel. We create content designed to inspire, challenge, and connect with viewers like you. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of Ethan's journey. Now, let's transition to the next part of our tale. What happens when this man, who believes he controls everything, steps out into the stormy night and encounters someone who challenges everything he thinks he knows? Stay tuned. The elevator doors open with a soft chime, revealing the sleek marble lobby of Ethan's skyscraper. A security guard nods respectfully from behind his desk, but Ethan barely acknowledges him as he strides toward the revolving glass doors. Outside, the storm rages on, rain cascading in sheets that blur the neon lights of the city streets. He hesitates for just a moment, pulling his coat tighter around himself before stepping out into the chaos. Ethan doesn't have a destination in mind. He rarely does when he leaves the office this late. His penthouse apartment is only a few blocks away, yet something about walking through the rain tonight feels necessary. Perhaps it's the weight of the day pressing down on him, or maybe it's the restless energy coursing through his veins. Whatever it is, he lets his feet guide him, turning left onto a quieter street lined with boutique shops and cafes. It's here, tucked between a vintage bookstore and a flower shop, that he sees it. A small, unassuming cafe with warm golden light spilling out onto the wet pavement. Above the door hangs a hand-painted sign that reads, Clara's Corner. Something about the name catches his attention, though he can't quite say why. Maybe it's the simplicity of it, or perhaps it's the contrast between the cozy little cafe and the sterile corporate world he just left behind. Either way, he finds himself pushing open the door without thinking twice. A bell tinkles softly overhead as he steps inside, shaking droplets of rain from his coat. The interior is nothing like his office. No cold steel or polished glass here. Instead, the space is filled with mismatched furniture, plush armchairs upholstered in faded floral patterns, wooden tables scarred with years of use, and shelves crammed with books and potted plants. The air smells of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods, mingling with the faint scent of vanilla candles. It's chaotic, imperfect, and utterly charming. Behind the counter stands a woman in her early 30s, humming softly as she wipes down the espresso machine. She looks up as the bell rings, her dark eyes meeting Ethan's for the first time. For a split second, neither of them speaks. Then she smiles, a genuine, radiant smile that seems to light up the entire room. "Evening," she says warmly. "You look like you could use a cup of coffee." Her voice is soothing, with just a hint of mischief, and it disarms Ethan in a way he doesn't expect. He clears his throat, suddenly aware of how out of place he must look in his tailored suit and expensive watch. Sure," he replies, his tone clipped but not unkind. "Black, no sugar." As she prepares his drink, Ethan takes a seat at one of the tables near the window. From here, he has a perfect view of the rain-soaked street outside, but his gaze keeps drifting back to the woman behind the counter. There's something about her, something indefinable, that intrigues him. Her movements are graceful yet unhurried, her presence calming, despite the storm raging beyond the walls. She wears a simple apron over a plain sweater and jeans, but there's a quiet elegance to her that transcends appearances. When she brings the coffee to his table, she sets it down gently and pulls out the chair across from him. "Mind if I join you?" she asks, tilting her head slightly. "It's slow tonight and I could use some company." Ethan raises an eyebrow, surprised by her boldness. Most people wouldn't dare intrude on someone like him, someone who radiates authority and detachment, but there's no malice in her expression, only curiosity. Against his better judgment, he nods. "Be my guest." She sits down, folding her hands on the table as she studies him intently. "I'm Clara," she says after a moment. "And you are?" "Ethan," he replies curtly, taking a sip of his coffee. It's surprisingly good, rich and smooth, with none of the bitterness he usually associates with mass-produced blends. He makes a mental note to ask where she sources her beans later. "Well, Ethan," Clara begins, leaning forward slightly, "what brings you out on a night like this? You don't strike me as the type who frequents places like mine." Her perceptiveness catches him off guard. "What type do I strike you as?" he challenges, his tone guarded. She shrugs, unfazed by his defensiveness. Someone who's used to being in control. Someone who doesn't leave much to chance. Her lips curve into a knowing smile, Am I wrong? For a moment, Ethan considers brushing her off, retreating behind the walls he's built so carefully over the years. But there's something about the way she looks at him, not with awe or intimidation, but with genuine interest, that makes him hesitate. No, he admits finally, you're not wrong. They fall into an easy conversation, though easy might be too generous a word. Clara has a way of asking questions that cut straight to the heart of things, forcing Ethan to confront thoughts and feelings he'd rather ignore. At one point, she leans back in her chair and says, almost casually, "Do you believe in destiny, Ethan?" He scoffs, setting his cup down with more force than intended. Destiny? That's for people who can't handle responsibility. I make my own path. Clara tilts her head, considering his words. Interesting, she murmurs, because sometimes, no matter how hard we try, life has a way of surprising us. Like tonight, for example. Did you plan on coming here? The question throws him. No, he hadn't planned it. In fact, he couldn't explain why he'd walked into this cafe in the first place, but admitting that feels dangerous, like opening a door he's spent years keeping locked. Coincidence, he mutters dismissively. She chuckles softly, clearly amused by his resistance. Maybe, or maybe it's something more. Before Ethan can respond, she changes the subject, steering the conversation toward lighter topics. They talk about books, music, and even the weather, though their exchanges are laced with subtle undercurrents. Every now and then, Clara drops a comment or observation that feels oddly personal, as if she knows him better than she should. When she mentions a specific incident from his childhood, Ethan freezes, his blood running cold. How do you know about that? He demands, his voice low and sharp. Clara meets his gaze steadily, her expression unreadable. Let's just say I've heard stories, she says cryptically, but that's a conversation for another time. The tension between them is palpable, charged with unanswered questions and unspoken truths. Yet instead of pushing further, Ethan finds himself letting it go, for now. There is something about Clara that makes him want to stay, to keep talking, even if it means venturing into territory he'd rather avoid. As the hours pass, the storm outside begins to subside, leaving the streets glistening under the dim glow of streetlights. Eventually, Ethan glances at his watch and realizes how late it's gotten. Reluctantly, he rises from his seat, pulling out his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" he asks, already reaching for $100 bill. Clara waves him off with a laugh. "Don't worry about it. Consider it on the house." "I insist," he presses, placing the bill on the table. She sighs, shaking her head. "Fine, but don't think this gets you out of coming back sometime." To his surprise, Ethan actually considers it. "Maybe I will," he says, his tone softer than before. As he steps back out into the damp night air, he feels different, lighter somehow, though he can't quite explain why. The encounter with Clara lingers in his mind, refusing to fade, even as he climbs into his car and drives home. Little does he know, this is only the beginning of a journey that will challenge everything he thought he knew about life, love, and destiny. The next morning, Ethan wakes up in his penthouse apartment to the soft hum of rain, still tapping against the floor-to-ceiling windows. He lies there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, replaying fragments of the previous night in his mind. The cafe. The woman, Clara. Her piercing gaze, her cryptic words, the way she seemed to see through him as if he were made of glass. It unsettles him more than he cares to admit. He shakes off the thoughts with practiced efficiency, rising from bed and slipping into his usual routine: shower, shave, suit, coffee brewed precisely to his specifications. By the time he steps into his office, he's convinced himself that last night was nothing more than a fleeting distraction, a brief detour from the relentless pace of his life. Yet as the day unfolds, snippets of his conversation with Clara keep resurfacing, like ripples in a pond after a stone has been cast. Meanwhile, across town, Clara begins her day in stark contrast to Ethan's regimented existence. She lives above the cafe in a cozy one-bedroom apartment filled with sunlight, books, and plants that climb toward the windows like eager explorers. Her mornings are unhurried, spent watering her greenery, sipping tea, and jotting notes in a worn leather journal. Today, however, her thoughts drift back to the man who walked into her cafe during the storm. "He's not like anyone I've ever met," she murmurs to herself, flipping through the pages of her journal. Over the years, she's developed a habit of sketching portraits of her customers, not just their physical features, but glimpses of their souls. Last night, she started a new entry for Ethan: sharp angles, softened by shadows, eyes that burn with intensity, yet betray a flicker of vulnerability. Beneath the drawing, she writes a single word: lost. As the hours pass, the narrative shifts between their two worlds, revealing the threads that bind them despite their vastly different lives. Flashbacks take us deeper into Ethan's past, painting a vivid picture of the sacrifices he made to achieve his success. We see young Ethan working odd jobs after school, delivering newspapers before dawn, stocking shelves at a grocery store late into the evening, all while excelling academically. His teachers praised his brilliance, but they also noted his isolation. While other kids played sports or attended parties, Ethan buried himself in textbooks and business plans, determined to escape the poverty that defined his childhood. One particularly poignant memory stands out. Ethan is 16, sitting alone in the high school cafeteria during lunch. Around him, groups of students laugh and chatter, but he remains an island unto himself. A classmate approaches hesitantly, holding out a sandwich. "You should eat something," she says kindly. Ethan glares at her, his pride wounded. "I don't need your charity," he snaps, pushing the sandwich away. The girl retreats, hurt, and Ethan feels a pang of guilt, but only briefly. Survival requires toughness, he tells himself. Weakness is not an option. Years later, as Ethan climbs the corporate ladder, these moments accumulate like layers of armor around his heart. Relationships falter under the weight of his ambition. His college girlfriend pleads with him to slow down, to prioritize their future together, but he dismisses her concerns. "If you can't handle my drive, maybe we're not meant to be," he says coldly, ending the relationship without looking back. Even his parents' deaths hit him like distant thunder. He attends their funerals stoically, refusing to let grief derail his momentum. By the time he reaches his 40s, Ethan has built an empire. But at what cost? The camera lingers on his reflection in the window of his office, showing a man who appears invincible, yet carries the weight of countless regrets. He tells himself it was worth it, that power and wealth are the ultimate measures of success. But deep down, he knows there's a void no amount of money can fill. In stark contrast, Clara's life has been shaped by loss and resilience. Her backstory unfolds through tender, intimate scenes that highlight her capacity for empathy and hope. When she was 12, her parents died in a car accident, leaving her orphaned and adrift. For months she struggled to cope, retreating into silence and solitude. But then something remarkable happened. The community rallied around her. Neighbors brought meals, teachers offered extra support, and friends became surrogate family members. These acts of kindness left an indelible mark on Clara, teaching her the value of human connection. As she grew older, she vowed to pay it forward, dedicating her life to helping others find joy and purpose. The cafe became her sanctuary, a place where people could gather, share stories, and feel seen. She named it Clara's Corner, not out of vanity, but as a reminder that everyone deserves a safe space to belong. Despite her warmth and optimism, Clara's journey hasn't been without challenges. Running a small business in a city dominated by corporate giants is no easy feat. Bills pile up, equipment breaks down, and there are days when she wonders if she's fighting a losing battle. Yet through it all, she clings to the belief that even the smallest gestures can create ripples of change. One scene captures this beautifully. Clara is closing up the cafe late at night when she notices a homeless man huddled under a nearby awning. Without hesitation, she packs a bag with leftover pastries and a thermos of hot soup, then walks over to offer it to him. "Thank you," he whispers, tears glistening in his eyes. Clara smiles softly, squeezing his shoulder before heading home. These moments may seem insignificant to some, but to her, they're everything. Back in the present, Ethan finds himself inexplicably drawn to Clara's cafe again. At first, he tries to rationalize it. He's curious about her cryptic remark, wants to understand how she knew about his past. But as the days turn into weeks, he realizes it's more than that. There's something magnetic about the place, about her. It's not just the coffee or the ambiance. It's the way she makes him feel seen, challenged, alive in ways he hasn't felt in years. Their conversations grow longer, deeper, each interaction peeling back another layer of their respective lives. One evening, as they sit side by side, at the counter, Clara shares a story about her parents. "They taught me that life isn't about avoiding storms," she says thoughtfully. "It's about learning to dance in the rain." Ethan listens intently, struck by the simplicity and wisdom of her words. For the first time in decades, he allows himself to imagine a different kind of life, one where success isn't measured solely by wealth or power. But Clara, too, senses the cracks beneath Ethan's polished exterior. During one particularly candid exchange, she asks, "What would you do if you weren't afraid of failing?" The question catches him off guard, forcing him to confront fears he's long suppressed. He doesn't answer immediately, but the seed has been planted. As their bond deepens, so does the tension between their opposing philosophies. Ethan represents control, logic, and self-reliance. The belief that destiny is a myth perpetuated by those unwilling to take responsibility for their own lives. Clara embodies intuition, compassion, and faith in something greater. The idea that sometimes life unfolds in ways we can't predict or explain. This ideological clash comes to a head during a heated discussion one rainy afternoon. Ethan argues passionately that every achievement in his life was the result of careful planning and relentless effort. "You think I got here by waiting around for fate to hand me a golden ticket?" he demands, his voice tinged with frustration. Clara meets his intensity with calm resolve. "No, I think you got here because you worked hard. But tell me this, did you plan on walking into my cafe that night? Did you plan on meeting me?" Her words strike a nerve, and for a moment Ethan is speechless. He wants to argue, to refute her point, but deep down he knows she's right. Meeting Clara wasn't part of his meticulously crafted plan, and yet it feels like the most significant thing that's happened to him in years. The storm clouds gathering in Ethan's life aren't just metaphorical. They're literal, over. The next few weeks, the city is plagued by relentless rain, mirroring the turmoil brewing within him. Each visit to Clara's cafe leaves him more conflicted, his rigid worldview cracking under the weight of her quiet wisdom. Yet, even as he begins to question the foundations of his beliefs, external forces conspire to pull him back into the familiar rhythm of control and ambition. At work, the pressure mounts. Ethan's company is on the verge of launching its most ambitious project yet, a groundbreaking artificial intelligence platform designed to revolutionize industries worldwide. Investors are salivating at the prospect of exponential returns. Media outlets are hailing it as the future, and his board of directors is breathing down his neck for results. One morning, Ethan sits in a high-stakes meeting with his executive team, surrounded by sleek glass walls and sterile fluorescent lighting. The atmosphere is tense. Everyone knows how much rides on this launch. His chief technology officer, a wiry man named Marcus, flips through slides detailing timelines, budgets, and potential risks. "We need to accelerate the rollout," Marcus insists, his voice clipped. "Our competitors are closing in. If we wait any longer, we risk losing our edge." Ethan listens silently, his fingers drumming against the polished mahogany table. He knows Marcus is right. The tech industry moves at breakneck speed, and hesitation can be fatal. But something inside him resists. For the first time, he questions whether rushing the product is worth sacrificing quality, or worse, integrity. These doubts gnaw at him, but he pushes them aside, nodding curtly. "Fine. Move up the timeline, but I want daily updates on every aspect of development." As the meeting adjourns, Ethan retreats to his office, sinking into his chair with a heavy sigh. Outside, the rain continues to fall, streaking the windows like tears. He stares blankly at the skyline, his mind racing. Why does everything feel so empty? He's achieved what most people only dream of: wealth, power, recognition. Yet, none of it brings him peace. Instead, It feels like a gilded cage, trapping him in a cycle of endless striving. His phone buzzes incessantly on the desk, notifications piling up from investors, journalists, and colleagues. He ignores them all, reaching instead for the leather-bound notebook he keeps tucked away in a drawer. It's filled with scribbled thoughts, half-formed ideas, and fragments of poetry he wrote years ago when he still allowed himself to dream. Flipping through the pages, he pauses at a line that makes his chest tighten. What good is a kingdom if you have no one to share it with? For a moment, he lets himself imagine what life might look like without the constant grind. What would it feel like to step away from the relentless pursuit of more, to prioritize connection over conquest? The thought terrifies him almost as much as it intrigues him. Who is he, if not the man who controls everything? While Ethan battles the demands of his empire, Clara faces her own set of challenges. Running a small business in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood is no easy feat, and lately the financial strain has become unbearable. Rent hikes, equipment repairs, and dwindling foot traffic have left her struggling to keep the cafe afloat. One evening, after closing up shop, Clara sits alone at one of the tables, poring over spreadsheets illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp. Numbers blur before her eyes, debts mounting faster than she can repay them, profits shrinking to almost nothing. She rubs her temples, exhaustion etched into her features. Despite her optimism, there's only so much she can do without help. Her landlord, Mr. Hargrove, stops by the next day, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, Clara," he says apologetically, handing her an envelope. Inside is a notice of eviction. "The building's been sold to developers. They want to turn it into condos." Clara's heart sinks, but she forces a smile, thanking him for letting her know. After he leaves, she slumps onto a stool behind the counter, staring at the notice in disbelief. How can she possibly fight this? Developers always win. It's a fact of life in the city. Still, the thought of losing the cafe feels like losing a piece of herself. It's not just a business. It's her legacy, her sanctuary, her way of giving back to the community. That night, Ethan walks in, shaking rain from his coat as usual. He notices immediately that something is wrong. Clara greets him with a strained smile, trying to mask her distress, but he sees through it instantly. "What happened?" he asks, his tone unusually gentle. She hesitates, then shows him the eviction notice. "They're shutting me down," she admits, her voice trembling. "There's nothing I can do." Ethan's jaw tightens, anger flaring, not at her, but at the injustice of it all. Without thinking, he blurts out, "I'll buy the EAV building." Clara looks at him sharply, her eyes narrowing. "No," she says firmly. "I won't let you fix this with money, Ethan. Some things aren't for sale." Her rejection stings, but it also awakens something in him, a flicker of admiration for her unwavering principles. For once, he doesn't argue. Instead, he sits beside her, offering silent support as she processes her emotions. In that moment, they're equals, not billionaire CEO and struggling cafe owner, but two people grappling with the fragility of their respective worlds. As days pass, both Ethan and Clara wrestle with profound internal conflicts. For Ethan, the cracks in his armor grow wider with each conversation he has with Clara. She challenges him to confront truths he's spent decades avoiding, that success isn't synonymous with fulfillment, that relationships matter more than accolades, that destiny might not be as controllable as he believes. One rainy afternoon, as they sit together in the cafe, Clara shares a memory that shakes him to his core. "When my parents died," she begins softly, "I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I was angry at them, at God, at the universe for taking them away. But over time, I realized something. Their deaths weren't the end of my story. They were part of it. And because of them, I learned how to love fiercely, how to find beauty, even in pain." Her words linger in the air, heavy with meaning. Ethan stares at his coffee cup, unable to meet her gaze. He thinks about his own parents, whose deaths he barely acknowledged at the time. Guilt washes over him, sharp and suffocating. Could he have done more? Should he have stayed closer, tried harder to mend their fractured relationship? The questions swirl in his mind, unresolved but impossible to ignore. Clara senses his turmoil and places a hand on his arm. "You don't have to have all the answers," she says gently. "Sometimes it's enough just to ask the right questions." Her touch sends a jolt through him, grounding him in a way he hasn't experienced in years. For the first time, he allows himself to entertain the possibility that maybe, just maybe, life isn't something to be controlled. Maybe it's something to be lived, fully and imperfectly, embracing both the storms and the sunshine. Despite these moments of clarity, the external pressures continue to mount. At work, Ethan's decision to delay the AI launch sparks outrage among shareholders. Rumors swirl about his declining mental state, fueled by tabloids eager to exploit any sign of weakness. Meanwhile, Clara fights tirelessly to save her cafe, organizing fundraisers and rallying community support. Though she refuses Ethan's offer of financial assistance, she secretly appreciates his presence during this difficult time. Their bond deepens, becoming a lifeline for both of them. Yet, beneath the surface, unspoken fears simmer. Ethan worries that his growing attachment to Clara will derail his career, and worse, that he'll lose her once the dust settles. Clara, too, harbors doubts. Is she strong enough to face whatever comes next? Can she truly trust someone who embodies everything she's spent her life resisting? The tension builds until it reaches a breaking point, a pivotal moment that will force them both to make choices they can't undo. Let's take a moment to reflect. Stories like these thrive because of your engagement. If you're moved by Ethan and Clara's journey, if you believe in the power of human connection to transform lives, please consider subscribing to our channel. The storm that had been brewing for weeks finally breaks one fateful evening, a tempest both literal and metaphorical. Rain lashes against the city streets, lightning illuminates the sky in jagged bursts, and the air is thick with electricity. It's as if nature itself senses the gravity of what's about to unfold. Ethan arrives at Clara's cafe soaked to the bone, his usual composure shattered. He doesn't bother shaking off the rain or removing his coat. Instead, he strides straight to her, his eyes wild with desperation. "We need to talk," he says, his voice trembling, not from fear, but from something deeper, more primal. Clara looks up from the counter, where she's arranging fresh flowers. Startled by the intensity in his gaze, she nods silently, gesturing toward the back room, a small, cozy space filled with mismatched furniture and shelves lined with books. They sit across from each other, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy between them. For a moment, neither speaks. Then Ethan exhales sharply, running a hand through his damp hair. "I can't stop thinking about what you said last time," he begins, his tone raw and unguarded. "About how life isn't something we control." Clara tilts her head, studying him intently. And he hesitates, struggling to find the words. "I think you're right. But it's not just that. There's something else, something I've been avoiding." Her brow furrows slightly, curiosity mingling with concern. "What is it?" Ethan leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His next words come out in a rush, as if speaking them aloud will make them real. "You knew things about me that night, the first time we met. Things no one else could possibly know. How did you know about my childhood? About my parents?" Clara freezes, her expression unreadable. For a long moment she simply stares at him, her dark eyes searching his face. Finally she sighs softly, resignation washing over her features. "Because I remember you," she says quietly. "From before?" "Before?" Ethan echoes, confusion clouding his voice. She nods, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "When I was a kid, my family lived in the same town as yours. We weren't close. We didn't even go to the same school. But I saw you sometimes. You were always different. Even then you carried this aura of determination, like nothing could stand in your way." Ethan's mind races, fragments of memories surfacing like shards of glass. He remembers glimpses of a girl with dark hair and bright eyes, though he never paid much attention to her. Back then, his focus was singular: survival, success, escape. "But why didn't you say anything sooner?" he asks, his voice tinged with frustration. "Because it wasn't the right time," Clara replies simply, "and because I wanted to get to know you, the person you are now, not the boy you used to be. Her honesty disarms him, stripping away the layers of defensiveness he's built over the years. For the first time, he allows himself to truly see her, not as a mysterious woman who challenges his beliefs, but as someone who has walked a parallel path shaped by loss and resilience. As the conversation deepens, Clara reveals another truth, one that changes everything. Her voice softens, almost breaking as she speaks. "There's something else you should know, something I haven't told anyone." Ethan stiffens, sensing the gravity of her words. "What is it?" She takes a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm sick, Ethan. Very sick. The doctors, they don't give me much time." The room seems to tilt, the air growing heavier with each passing second. Ethan feels as though the ground has been ripped out from under him. "No," he whispers, shaking his head. "That's not possible." "It's true," she says, tears glistening in her eyes, but her voice steady. "I found out a few months ago. At first, I was angry, scared, but then I realized something. Life isn't defined by how long we live. It's defined by how well we live. And I've decided to spend whatever time I have left doing what matters most, helping others, connecting with people, finding joy in the little things." Ethan stares at her, his chest tightening painfully. He wants to argue, to demand answers, to fix this somehow, but deep down, he knows there's nothing he can do. For all his wealth and power, he's powerless against this cruel twist of fate. "I don't understand," he says hoarsely. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want you to pity me," she admits, "and because I needed to figure out who I am without letting this define me. Now, I'm ready to share it with you, if you're willing to listen." Her vulnerability pierces through his defenses, leaving him exposed in a way he hasn't been in decades. Tears blur his vision as he reaches for her hand, gripping it tightly. "I'm here," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever happens, I'm here." The hours that follow are some of the most profound of Ethan's life. Together they talk late into the night, sharing stories, dreams, and fears. Clara tells him about her happiest memories, playing in the park with her parents, reading books under the stars, dancing in the rain. She encourages him to open up about his own past, coaxing out buried emotions he thought he'd locked away forever. At one point, she leads him outside into the storm, laughing as they dance barefoot in the puddles. For Ethan, it's an unfamiliar kind of freedom, a release from the chains of control and expectation. In that moment, surrounded by chaos yet utterly present, he feels alive in a way he hasn't in years. Back inside, they sit by the window, watching the rain ease into a gentle drizzle. Clara rests her head on his shoulder, her breathing slow and steady. "Promise me something," she murmurs sleepily. "Anything," he replies without hesitation. "Don't let this break you," she says, her voice firm despite her fatigue. "When I'm gone, keep living, keep loving, keep fighting for what matters." Tears stream down Ethan's face as he pulls her closer, holding her, as if he can shield her from the inevitable. "I promise," he whispers, knowing full well how fragile promises can be. By morning, the storm has passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under the pale light of dawn. Ethan sits alone in the cafe, staring at the empty chair where Clara sat just hours before. She's upstairs, resting now, exhausted from the emotional toll of the night. But her words echo in his mind like a mantra. Keep living. Keep loving. He realizes with startling clarity that he's been given a gift, a chance to rewrite his story before it's too late. For so long he's clung to the illusion of control, believing that success could fill the void within him. But now he understands that true fulfillment comes from connection, from embracing the messy, unpredictable beauty of life. As the days pass, Ethan begins to change in ways both subtle and profound. He steps back from the relentless grind of his career, delegating responsibilities to trusted colleagues and focusing on projects that align with his values. He visits Clara daily, cherishing every moment they share, whether it's sipping coffee, in silence, or reminiscing about old memories. But perhaps the most significant shift is internal. Ethan starts to let go, not just of his need for control, but of the guilt and regret that have haunted him for years. With Clara's guidance, he learns to forgive himself, to embrace imperfection, to trust in the unknown. If this story resonates with you, if it reminds you of the importance of love, connection, and living fully, please consider subscribing to our channel. The days following Clara's revelation are a blur of bittersweet moments, fragile, yet profound, fleeting, yet eternal. Ethan spends nearly every waking hour by her side, savoring the time they have left together. They laugh, cry, and dream, creating memories that will sustain him long after she's gone. Yet, even as they cling to each other, the shadow of inevitability looms over them, casting a quiet ache beneath their joy. One evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Clara sits on the cafe's front steps with Ethan. She's wrapped in a soft blanket, her face pale but radiant. "Do you remember the first time we met?" she asks, her voice tinged with nostalgia. Ethan smiles faintly, nodding. "How could I forget? You called me out on my arrogance within 5 minutes of meeting me." She chuckles softly, the sound like music to his ears. "And here we are now. Look how far you've come." He looks at her, his heart swelling with gratitude and sorrow. "I wouldn't have made it this far without you," he admits, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me, Clara, in more ways than one?" Her gaze softens and she reaches for his hand, squeezing it gently. "No, Ethan, you saved yourself. I just gave you permission to let go." They sit in silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker to life. It's a moment suspended in time, a fragile thread holding them together before the inevitable unraveling. Weeks later, the inevitable arrives. Clara passes away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the warmth of the community she loved so dearly. Ethan is there when it happens, holding her hand as her breathing slows and finally stills. The room is quiet except for the sound of his muffled sobs, tears streaming down his face as he whispers goodbye. In the days that follow, Ethan retreats into himself, consumed by grief. He cancels meetings, ignores calls, and isolates himself from the world. The penthouse apartment that once symbolized his success now feels suffocating, its opulence mocking his emptiness. He wanders through the space like a ghost, haunted by memories of Clara, the way she laughed, the way she challenged him, the way she made him believe in something greater than himself. But amidst the pain, a spark remains, a promise he made to her on that stormy night: keep living, keep loving. Those words become his lifeline, pulling him back from the brink of despair. Determined to honor her memory, Ethan begins to take action. He starts small, visiting the cafe daily to help clean, organize, and prepare meals for the community. At first, it feels strange, out of place, but over time he finds solace in the rhythm of simple tasks. The cafe becomes a sanctuary, not just for others, but for himself. Inspired by Clara's vision, Ethan decides to transform the space into something even bigger, a community center dedicated to fostering connection and creativity. He works tirelessly, alongside volunteers, pouring his resources and energy into the project. When the grand reopening finally arrives, the cafe has been reborn as Clara's Corner Community Hub, a vibrant space filled with art workshops, book clubs, and support groups. During the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Ethan stands before a crowd of friends, neighbors, and strangers whose lives Clara touched. His speech is heartfelt and raw, a testament to the woman who changed everything. "Clara taught me that life isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you give," he says, his voice trembling with emotion. "She believed in the power of human connection, and so do I." This place is her legacy, and I hope it inspires all of us to live with purpose, compassion, and courage. As applause fills the air, Ethan gazes around the room, imagining Clara smiling down on them. For the first time in weeks, he feels a glimmer of peace, a sense that she's still with him, guiding him forward. With the community center up and running, Ethan begins to rebuild his own life. He steps down as CEO of his company, handing the reins to a trusted protege who shares his values. Instead, he focuses on philanthropy, launching initiatives to support small businesses, education, and mental health awareness. Each project bears Clara's influence, reflecting her belief in the transformative power of kindness and connection. One particularly poignant moment comes during a charity gala, where Ethan delivers a keynote address. Standing on stage under dazzling chandeliers, he recounts his journey, from the boy who grew up poor and determined, to the man who lost himself in ambition, to the person he's become thanks to Clara. Destiny isn't something we control, he tells the audience, his voice steady and resolute. It's something we embrace, and sometimes destiny walks into our lives in the most unexpected ways, in the form of a stranger, a friend, or someone who changes everything. The room erupts in applause, but Ethan barely hears it. His thoughts are with Clara, imagining her sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Ethan visits the cafe-turned-community center. The space buzzes with activity. Children laughing in an art class, seniors gathered for a poetry reading, young entrepreneurs brainstorming ideas over coffee. He lingers near the entrance, taking it all in, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. His eyes fall on a framed photograph hanging on the wall, a candid shot of Clara, mid-laugh, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Beneath it is a plaque inscribed with her favorite quote, "Life isn't about avoiding storms, it's about learning to dance in the rain." Ethan smiles softly, tracing the words with his fingertips. "Thank you," he murmurs, speaking to her as if she's standing right beside him, "for everything." As he turns to leave, a young girl tugs at his sleeve, holding out a drawing she made. It's a picture of two figures dancing in the rain, surrounded by colorful swirls. "This is for you," she says shyly. Touched, Ethan kneels down to her, level, accepting the gift with a grateful smile. "It's perfect," he says. "Thank you." Walking away, he feels lighter somehow, as if Clara's spirit is alive in every corner of the world, reminding him to keep dancing, no matter the storm. The seasons change, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson as autumn gives way to winter. Snow blankets the streets, muffling the sounds of bustling life and casting a serene stillness over the neighborhood. Yet inside Clara's Corner community hub, warmth radiates like an eternal flame, a testament to the woman whose spirit continues to guide those who enter its doors. Ethan stands near the large bay window at the front of the cafe, watching flakes drift lazily from the sky. His reflection stares back at him, but it's no longer the same man who once stood behind towering glass walls in his penthouse office. Gone is the sharp-edged executive, the man who believed he could bend the world to his will. In his place stands someone softer, wiser, a man shaped by love, loss, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. He thinks about Clara often, every day in fact. Sometimes it's in small ways, the scent of vanilla candles that reminds him of her cozy apartment, the sound of laughter echoing through the community center, which mirrors her infectious joy. Other times it's in moments of quiet introspection, when he finds himself asking what she would do or say if she were here. Though she's physically absent, her presence is woven into every corner of his life, a constant reminder of the lessons she taught him. One snowy evening, Ethan sits alone in the cafe, nursing a cup of coffee brewed exactly the way Clara liked it, strong with just a hint of sweetness. Around him, the space hums with activity, volunteers decorating for the holidays, musicians rehearsing carols, families gathered around tables, sharing stories. It's a scene Clara would have cherished, and knowing that brings both comfort and sorrow. Ethan pulls out his leather-bound notebook, the same one he used years ago to jot down fragments of poetry, and begins to write. At first, the words come haltingly, hesitant and raw, but as he writes they flow more freely, spilling onto the page like rain after a drought. To Clara, you were my storm and my calm, my chaos and my peace. You showed me that life isn't something to be controlled, it's something to be lived, fully and fearlessly. Because of you, I learned to let go, to trust, to believe in the beauty of the unknown. And though you're gone, your light shines brighter than ever, guiding me forward even in the darkest nights. When he finishes, tears blur his vision, smudging the ink slightly. He closes the notebook, pressing it to his chest, as if holding on to her memory just a little tighter. For so long he feared vulnerability, believing it was a weakness. Now he knows it's the source of his strength. Clara's influence extends far beyond Ethan, touching countless lives in ways both big and small. One such person is Mia, a young artist who frequents the community center. She was once shy and insecure, hesitant to share her work with others. But under the encouragement of mentors and peers inspired by Clara's ethos, Mia blossoms into a confident creator, using her art to spark conversations about mental health and resilience. During an exhibition showcasing local talent, Ethan watches proudly as Mia unveils a mural dedicated to Clara. The piece depicts two figures dancing in the rain, surrounded by vibrant colors and swirling patterns. Beneath it, a plaque reads, "For Clara, who taught us to find joy in the storms." Mia approaches Ethan afterward, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," she says simply, "for keeping her memory alive." Ethan shakes his head, smiling softly. "It's not me, it's all of you. Clara's legacy lives because people like you carry it forward." Moments like these remind Ethan why he chose this path. Clara didn't just change him. She ignited a chain reaction, inspiring others to live with purpose and compassion. Her belief in the power of human connection has become a beacon, lighting the way for everyone fortunate enough to cross her orbit. On the anniversary of Clara's passing, Ethan visits the park where they danced in the rain that fateful night. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Snow blankets the ground, muffling his footsteps as he walks along the winding path. At the center of the park stands a bench, adorned with a plaque bearing Clara's name. Beneath it, engraved in elegant script, are the words, "In loving memory of Clara Bennett, who taught us to dance in the rain." Ethan sits down, brushing snowflakes from the seat. He pulls out a thermos of coffee and pours himself a cup, savoring the familiar aroma. As he takes a sip, he closes his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. He can almost hear her voice, teasing him for being too serious, urging him to loosen up and enjoy the moment. "I miss you," he whispers, his breath visible in the cold air. Every single day. For a long time he sits there, listening to the wind rustle through the trees and the distant laughter of children playing in the snow. It's peaceful, not empty, but full of her essence. He realizes then that saying goodbye doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying someone with you, letting their light illuminate your path. As the sun sets, casting the park in hues of lavender and gold, Ethan rises from the bench and begins the walk home. The snow crunches beneath his boots, each step a reminder of how far he's come and how much farther he has yet to go. Back at his apartment, he pauses before a framed photograph of Clara on his mantel. Her smile is radiant, her eyes filled with mischief and wisdom. Beside it sits the drawing the young girl gave him months ago, the one of two figures dancing in the rain. Together, they form a perfect pair, symbols of the past and future intertwined. Ethan smiles softly, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. He knows now that destiny isn't something to be feared or controlled. It's something to be embraced, trusted, and celebrated. And sometimes, destiny walks into your life in the most unexpected ways, changing everything. Before bed, he opens his notebook once more, flipping to a blank page. At the top, he writes a single sentence. Life isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Below it, he sketches a simple image, two figures twirling beneath an open sky, surrounded by swirls of color and light. It's imperfect, messy, but beautiful in its authenticity, just like life itself. And so, dear viewer, we reach the end of Ethan and Clara's unforgettable journey, a tale of love, loss, and transformation that reminds us of the power of human connection. If this story has touched your heart, if it's inspired you to cherish the moments, embrace the storms, and dance in the rain, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to create content that moves, inspires, and connects us all. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. Until next time, may you find joy in the storms and beauty in the unknown. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. The end.